Good morning, class. So our lesson for today is about types and features of poetry. But before we start our lesson for today, let us have our learning objectives. So at the end of the lesson, the students should be able to examine sound devices like alliteration, consonants, and assonance in poetry, perform a short monologue as one of the characters from the poem, focusing on physicality and voice to bring the character to life, and reflect on the moral and ethical dilemmas presented in the poem, such as the Duke's possessiveness and control over the Duchess. So, lyric poetry is the most common type, and it includes haiku, ode, elegy, and limerick. So, an example of lyric poetry is Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. Narrative poetry tells a story. There are two types of narrative poetry, epic poems and ballads. So, when we say epic poems, it tells about conflict or history, and when we say ballads, it tells a story about a particular person. So an example of narrative poetry is The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. So in dramatic poetry, it lets the poem characters to tell the story. So an example of this is The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Proceed to the rhythm and meter. So rhythm in poetry, it means that it is the flow of sound produced by language. So this pattern of rhythm in a poem is called meter. So when we say rhythm, it refers to the pattern of sound created by the arrangement of stressed and unstressed syllables within lines of a poem. So this rhythm is essential for establishing the musical quality and the pace of the poem. So the pattern of the rhythm in a poem is what we call meter. Meters. Meters are based on syllables and on stress, the vocal emphasis given to a syllable. So there are three main types of meter. It includes syllabic, stress, and footburst. So when we say syllabic meters, these are based on the number of syllables in a line. So the most common syllabic meters are continuous syllabics and stanzaic syllabics. So in continuous syllabics, the poet uses the same number of syllables in each line of the poem. In stanzaic syllables, the number of syllables in each line of the first stanza is repeated in the corresponding line of all other stanzas. So the next we have is the stress meters. The stress meter, also known as accentual meter, so it relies on the placement of stress syllables in each line of the poem. So the number of unstressed syllables between stressed ones can vary. An example is iambic pentameter, which consists of 5 pairs of alternating unstressed and stressed syllables.
Thank you, Ma'am Pascua, for that wonderful presentation. And I am Ma'am Macapagal.
For these slides, we're going to talk about the poem titled My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Are you guys ready to know who is Robert Browning and what is My Last Duchess all about? But first, let's talk about who is Robert Browning. Robert Browning was a renowned English poet and playwright who lived during the Victorian era. He was born on May 7, 1812, in Camberwell, London, and is known for his dramatic monologues and innovative use of language. Browning works often explored complex psychological and moral themes, and he is considered one of the most influential poets of his time. The next slide is a clip of the poem My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Please listen carefully because after the clip, we're going to have a Q&A.
That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Frau Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Well, please you sit and look at her. I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. but to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half-flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how should I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one, my favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked, somehow I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900-years-old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Even had you the skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such a one, and say just this or that in you disgusts me, here you miss or there exceed the mark, and if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, e'en then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled no doubt whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew. I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. There she stands, as if alive. Will't please your eyes? Will we?
So, after watching the clip, we're going to have a question and answer. First question, how does Browning use dramatic monologue to reveal the Duke characters? Please open your messenger and open our group chat. Send your response on our group chat. Question number 2. What does the Duke's attitude toward his last Duchess reveal about his own flaws? Number 3. How does Browning create tensions and suspense through the poem? Number 4. What is the significance of the title My Last Duchess? And last question, number 5. How does Browning explore the theme of pride and arrogance in the character of the Duke? You have 30 seconds left. Time's up. Upon checking your answer in our group chat, most of the answers are correct. Thank you for your participation.
So now that you are done watching the video discussion we provided to you, let us now proceed to our evaluation or our quiz for today. So we will use quizzes for our quiz today, so let us have the directions first. So the test contains 10 multiple choice questions. Choose the option that you believe is the correct answer to each question. You will have a limited amount of time to answer each question, so try to answer as quickly as possible. You will earn points for each correct answer, and no points will be deducted for incorrect answers. So at the end of the test, you will receive your overall score and feedback on your performance. So good luck and take a deep breath. Stay focused and begin the test by clicking on the start button. So if you have any questions or if you encounter any technical issues, please don't hesitate to ask. So you can access the quiz by clicking the link that I already sent to our GC earlier.